Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to IES and welcome to this event today. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Duncan Edwards. I'm the Research Evidence and Learning Programme Manager for Making All Voices Count. And thanks for the effort in coming here. Thanks for all our speakers for joining us. Just by way of just to go through the agenda, what's happening today, some of the logistics for today. We're starting a little bit late. We've had a few technical problems bringing in our colleague Olive Moore from GPSA. We won't be bringing her in at this session, so she might, if we can get the technology to work, bring her in a little bit later. First session will be an introductory session that Rosie will lead. And then we'll, at 10 between, hopefully we'll get through that quickly. And we'll be moving on to Anu and Helen's session, which will be looking at context to the state. Then we'll have a coffee break at about 11 for 15 minutes. And then we move on to a session that will be chaired by Brendan. Thank you very much. Which will be looking at tax, budgets and services within the state. We'll be taking lunch between 1 and 2. And Melissa Leach, the Director of IDS, will be coming in at the start of lunch just to say a few words and to meet a number of you. Then in the afternoon, we've got an exciting panel which is entitled Working from the Outside In, which Rosie will be chairing, followed by a coffee break, 3:30 till 3:45, and then we'll be having a wrap-up session that John Gaventa will be chairing. Just a few kind of housekeeping issues. Toilets, that's through the door there. If you go straight out, you get to the wall. Ladies on the left, the men's just round to the right. Throughout the day, we want it to be a kind of relaxed atmosphere. We want you to feel free to say what you think, rather than what you think your organisation should be thinking. So we'll be using Chatham House rules. We will be live streaming a couple of the sessions. So this session itself will be live streamed, and the plenary session at the end. But any reporting, any live tweeting that's going on, we won't be attributing any names to what's being said. I hope that's okay with everybody. I just wanted to quickly introduce the IDS team. So if you have any questions, have any problems or anything, Sienna sat just here. And Kat. And is Alison in the room? Yeah, okay. And Gabrielle, who a lot of you met on the way in. So I'll just hand over to Rosie for the introductory framing session.
Thank you very much. So I echo Duncan's welcome to everyone. We would have gone around the room doing introductions, but we've been waiting because of the technical glitches and there are train delays, so some people are still running late, so we're going to save time by not doing that. But I think people have been chatting anyway, please do carry on with that. So I am here to frame the day, but I guess maybe I have to give a bit of background on making a voice count to some people, because not everybody. This is a citizen engagement and accountable governance programme, which is led by a consortium with HEWOS leading the consortium and IDS managing the research evidence and learning part of the consortium, and Ushahidi and HEWOS leading the tech side of the programme, which is essentially about granting to and supporting innovation and scaling initiatives in 6 priority countries, which are South Africa, Ghana, Kenya, Tanzania, Indonesia and the Philippines. And the programme has been going for almost 2 years. It aims to harness the transformative potential of unusual partnerships. So we're reaching out in particular to private sector actors and to government actors, in contrast to some earlier citizen engagement programmes which are focused very much on the citizen side, or stateside programmes which are focused very much on the state side. And a further feature of it is that there's a big focus on innovative applications of communication technologies for the purposes of transparency and accountability, and a real effort to try to push that right through to getting government response out of it, getting accountability out of it. I think an exceptional feature of the programme is the inclusion of this really significant research research, evidence and learning component as an integral part of the programme, which again is something quite innovative, and I think lots of us in the room have been crying out for things like this for a long time, because there's a lot of need to promote and sort of bring about reflective learning within this sector. So the component really offers, our component offers an opportunity to build this unique base of evidence in a sphere which a senior different person said last year is a very evidence-free zone, the zone of technology for transparency and accountability in particular. So here today, this kind of space is one of our roles, to hold events like this, to produce materials for events like this, to produce materials out of them. Some of you have engaged in previous events and activities like the big learning event that we held in Dar es Salaam last year, or the e-dialogues that we held from here from IDS in January last year. And we really see this as a space for learning and for sharing our learning. Learning how better to supply your needs and others' needs in terms of research and evidence and learning in this field. There are obviously lots of other spaces for learning, networks and platforms and things, and some of you are represented here, some of those who run those networks or participate in those. But I think what we're trying to do here is not create another parallel process, it's to sort of be a nexus where we can learn in a collaborative way and build on all of those other initiatives. And I think it's just important to note that lots of us operate constantly in this very sort of, in the business side of the field where we're all competing against each other often, or jockeying for position about who we join up with to bid for this or that or whatever. But today what we really want is to have constructive, collaborative learning and discussion and sharing of learning. So of course, we're all involved in lots of those kinds of processes at the moment. The real purpose for today is to have that sort of quality of discussion. So, without further ado, on the tables there's a document which I feel very excited about because I feel as though I just gave birth. It's not quite perfect, but it will be. This is our research and evidence strategy, and this has been a long time in the coming because we did do a sort of small drafty one when we started the programme, and then during the first year and a half of the programme we've been listening and learning and really trying to tap in and understand how best to hone this to really meet the needs, the range of needs that we're trying to meet, which is quite diverse, as you'll hear in a moment. So I'm going to talk through certain key features of this, and I really hope that people will take away copies. It will be available online once we've made it absolutely perfect. We do see it as a living document as well, because the field is not static, so this strategy will not be static. But just to say a few things about what's in here, to encourage you to pick it up and have a good look at parts that might particularly interest you. It's as a basis for sort of setting out the research and evidence strategy of the programme. The document unpacks the programme's theory of change, which is quite a complex one. It relates to citizen engagement and government responsiveness and accountability through a number of different possible impact pathways, and with a particular emphasis on tech. It reviews briefly the country plans that MABC has been drawing up for the 6 priority countries of the programme, and it sort of looks at those for their research implications. And it also reviews in some detail 6 recent sources in the literature, which we've selected to sort of, obviously they're not entirely representative, not in an exhaustive way, but they seem to us to be kind of key items of literature which provide the cutting edge for where some of our most important priority issues are at the moment. So those are probably familiar to lots of you in the room. In fact, I think we've got contributors or co-editors of some of them in the room. There's the Carruthers and Reckon-Macker piece about accountability, participation and inclusion. There's Jonathan Fox's latest work on social accountability, what does the evidence really say? There's a piece by Cossack and Fong. There's Dirk's latest piece that was commissioned by the Transparency and Accountability Initiative for today. There's Anu Joshi's piece, where's Anu? There you are. And we'll be hearing more about this later from Anu. And there's the co-edited book by Soren Giegler and Salita Weiler on closing the feedback loop. So there's a bit of a review of those. Trying to draw out from those, what does this tell us as a programme, as a research and evidence component of a programme, about where we should be taking the research and evidence agenda of the programme today. So, I just realised that we didn't get the Transparency and Accountability Initiative to just say hello. Brendan and Nessa, would you like to just raise your hands so people know who you are, because you're kind of co-hosts of this series of seminars. So Brendan and Vanessa are both from the Transparency and Accountability Initiative, which along with the, which along with the GPSA, which is not online. are sort of co-hosts of this series of seminars. This is one of them. Sorry about that. So, what are the priority research themes and questions which we are working on, and which this document kind of provides some of the background and the justification for? One of the key ones, and this relates to all of the other ones as well, the first one here, is about trying to learn more still from the first generation of transparency and accountability and citizen voice and government responsiveness work. Because there's an enormous amount of learning still to be plumbed from that work, and you only have to look around at some of the initiatives out there about tech for transparency to see that lots of the potential learning has not happened. And there's lots that might be known in some quarters or might be learned at the sort of tacit knowledge level, but is not getting built in to some of the new wave of initiatives that's using technology. And there's a number of possible reasons for this, which we've been kind of coming into contact with a lot and thinking about a lot over the last 2 years, as I'm sure some of you have. So there's lots of unresolved questions, and within this programme we want to actively support conceptual work to really flesh out the sort of theoretical and conceptual basis for understanding citizen-led accountability and accountable responsive governance, whether tech-enabled or not, and use that to really help enhance effectiveness and impact in the field that MABC is working in, where technology and innovation are very much stressed. So the themes below are all themes that we can learn about still, more than we have to date from the sort of pre-tech, non-tech, offline approaches to accountability. And we think there's still lots and lots of lessons to be harvested from that we really, really need to feed into the sort of burgeoning tech field. Government responsiveness, a range of issues, and of course this day is a very important sort of moment to focus on questions of government responsiveness. There's a lot of work on the government side of things, but it tends to be among governance specialists, quite academic, quite scholarly perhaps in orientation, or feeding into kind of state-side aid programs. There's not that much work which is oriented towards helping citizens or citizen-led groups to engage with the state in ways which are really effective and which bring about change. And I think this is one of our key focuses today. There's all sorts of, we all know things about champions being a good strategy, but what do we actually know about how that really works? So there are a number of kind of sub-questions and issues which you can peruse at your leisure in the strategy document, to do with government responsiveness. Exclusion and inclusion, it's no coincidence that the programme is called Making All Voices Count. And you can understand that all in a range of ways, but I think the consensus that we work towards with our donors and among ourselves is that there's a lot going on which is divisory in the world out there in socio-economic terms, which might actually be compounded by a heavy emphasis on technological approaches to citizen engagement and government responsiveness if we don't actively do something to counter that. So this isn't about marginalised populations particularly and reaching out to the hardest to reach, but it is about spotting the places where the fissures arise between the haves and the have-nots, the heard and the unheard, those who can voice and those who can't voice, or those whose voices are silenced, and really trying to make sure that in this field of tech for transparency and accountability, we don't accidentally compound those or leave them as they are, but we actively try to engage with those and change the divisory nature of some of the dynamics that could come in by upping the tech stakes. Citizen engagement in the time of technology, this is very much about synthesising and using what's known so far from the kind of first generation of transparency and accountability work, questioning assumptions, looking at questions of citizen engagement and voice when it gets aggregated, mediated, interpreted, represented through technological processes and innovations. Scaling up, scaling down, scaling out. There's a big line of work in the programme which is about scaling innovations which are deemed to have proven their concept. What does that mean? Proving their concept for whom? Who decides what is worth scaling? What's the best way to scale it? What can be learned about scaling as a transformative strategy? How does it apply in this field? It's that sort of question that we're wanting to look into. I'm going to skip very briefly through the kind of fundamentals about the REL component, which are in the document. We set out the meanings of these big words like research and theory and evidence and action research from our perspective, which we haven't reinvented the meanings, but we certainly interpreted them from our perspective. So we would understand research to mean inquiry, which leads to construction and co-construction of both theory and applied knowledge. So there's a very strong emphasis on practice and research for applied purposes, and a strong emphasis as well on co-construction. And there are different strands within the strategy which enable us to address either the more practical and applied end or the more kind of theoretical and evidence-based end of things. And I won't say any more about those meanings, you can look at them. In terms of purposes, we've sort of phrased this as, on the one hand, what we're calling program learning, which is kind of learning for applied purposes, and on the other hand, evidence and theory building, which does what it says on the tin, I think. Actors and roles, we see as key actors that we're working with and for and to quite a range of actors, practitioners, scholars, funders, implementing agencies, and we as IDS are in there partly to fund and support and manage research as a programme, but also to conduct some of the research within the programme ourselves. This beautiful diagram, my curly-whirly diagram, that you can't read any of on here, but it's in your documents, tries to represent the programme in terms of 3 layers of activity. On the one hand, at the bottom, the kind of projects and initiatives level, kind of micro level. In the middle, the sort of country level, what we're trying to achieve at the level of countries, the 6 priority countries. And at the top level, the overall story, the narratives, the kind of overall impact of the programme. And tries to illustrate by colour-coded bits on it what we're trying to do in the way of bringing in knowledge, research, understanding and evidence from outside the programme in at each of those levels, so that's what you see in blue. What we're trying to spin off at each of those levels in terms of learning for different purposes, which is represented in green. What we're feeding to our evaluation management unit, 2 members of which are in the room, Gil and Helen, which is an external evaluation management unit that's responsible for evaluating us, and we obviously have quite an interface with them in the research evidence and learning component. And in pink there, what are the kind of types of research that we support which are predominant at each of those levels. So there's quite a lot to unpick there. I'm sure there's a lot that can be improved on it, but that's an attempt to represent it all graphically. And just finally, in terms of putting the research and evidence strategy into action, I should say as well, this is not called a research and evidence and learning strategy because the person most responsible for learning, who's Alison here, only started at IDS 9 days ago. So we will be reworking this. It is a live document, and the learning focus will be further worked through the document. But of course, research and evidence are all about learning, so it's not without reference to it at all. These are the kinds of instruments and activities that we have at our disposal as the research evidence and learning component. We have research grants. Those are 3 types. There's a funding stream which is about practitioner research grants, very much does what it says, aimed at improving practice within MABC and outside MABC, but very much at the practitioner end of things. Third-party research grants, which we can issue to others to work either at the level of particular countries or particular themes and questions within that research agenda that I went through. Some of those we are kind of commissioning and soliciting interested people to talk to us about them. We will be issuing a call in June for third-party research on a number of different issues, and we'll be making sure that reaches all of you. And we'd be really glad if you can engage with us through that channel. There's also funds for some research at IDS around some of the themes in the agenda. Brokering, this is all about having conversations, sometimes with potential grantees, sometimes with potential targets for influence of our research and evidence work. We have a research outreach team which we've just constituted, which helps us to extend our outreach in the 6 countries where MABC focuses. Those are people with a research background in governance, tech, transparency and accountability, who work with us on a consultancy basis to help in that way. We hold an annual learning and inspiration event every year. Some of you were there last year. We're holding one in the Philippines later this year. We do various forms of capacity development, some of them directly with funded partners and some of them in a much more indirect way. We have a strong focus on research uptake and communication, seeing this not just as kind of comms for branding, but because research uptake is of course the key way that research work in this field can have an impact. And finally, monitoring, evaluation and learning sits here at IDS. The M&E and learning for the whole programme sits here at IDS because it's obviously kind of intrinsically connected to the work of the research evidence and learning component. And this is something which is really aiming to both provide the donors with the financial accountability that they need on the programme and the kind of programme effectiveness type accountability, but really in a very strong way to use all kinds of monitoring evaluation processes to really recycle and strengthen and consolidate learning within the programme and among our full range of stakeholders. So just to close with a small thought for those of you familiar with Kolb's learning cycle. The way forward for the research evidence and learning component is all about making sure that we reflect and learn from our own experience within the programme and beyond, and that we make sure that all of our other colleagues across the programme who are not sort of knowledge specialists or specialists on the research side take on this same approach, because it seems to us it's something quite lacking at the moment in the field of technology for transparency, accountability, engagement, government accountability, etc. And so we're trying very hard to kind of get this as our modus operandi right across the programme, and today is an interesting sort of example of that. I think stopping to share things that we're working on in various contexts and capacities, and really try to learn from the experience and then take it out forward into the various fields that we work in.
Great. Just to highlight that although we are doing a call in June, we're open to research proposals at any time. So, Ali, do you want to join the panel?
But Helene would be ready already. Do we cover on Helene?
Yeah, Helen's been sitting in on this.
Washington.